The shadow of Neovia. Richard had come to Zeta Prime Spaceport for anonymity. That was the lie he told himself, anyway. The truth was uglier. Men like him did not disappear because they wanted peace. They disappeared because if they stayed visible for too long, entire sectors started whispering their names with fear, hope, or both. And Richard had grown tired of being either a weapon or a miracle. So he kept to the edges of the galaxy now, out of politics, out of wars, out of prophecy. He rented a narrow apartment in a forgotten transit district, flew under false registry codes, and spent his days moving through crowded places where nobody looked twice at another stranger. Zeta Prime was perfect for that. It was loud, dirty, overcrowded, and gloriously indifferent. The central marketplace stretched for nearly a kilometer beneath a lattice of glowing support beams and translucent shield panels that filtered the harsh light of the station's twin suns. Vendors shouted in harmonized clicks, rolling growls, and translated trade tongues. Cargo drones skimmed overhead. Steam from food stalls drifted low through the aisles, thick with pepper oil and sweet-burning herbs. A six-limbed musician played something that sounded like grief on a crystal instrument near a stall selling black-market cybernetics. Somewhere farther down, someone was arguing over antimatter permits. Richard moved through it all like a dark blade through water. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Plain black jacket. Short-cropped hair. Eyes too still for an ordinary man. He paused at a stall where an Andorian merchant displayed a tray of ancient quantum stabilizers, on faded velvet. Finest relic-grade tech this side of the galaxy, the blue-skinned vendor said quickly, mistaking Richard's silence for interest. Military salvage. Pre-collapse design. Only 500 credits. Richard looked at the stabilizer between thumb and forefinger. Cheap alloy. Wrong weight. The microlattice had been stamped by a machine less than 6 months old. It's worth 50, he said. The vendor swallowed. A discerning customer. A dishonest seller. Richard set it down and turned away. That was when the crowd rippled. Not parted. Shuddered. People were moving, not the casual shifting of a busy market, but the sharp sidestep of prey sensing danger too close. Richard heard the change before he saw it. Boots striking metal decking in pursuit, breath snagging in panic, a crash of overturned produce crates, a voice biting back a scream. A woman burst through the aisle. Her skin was the color of deep ocean water under moonlight, rich blue with a subtle iridescent sheen when the station lights hit it. 2 elegant horns curved back from her temples, polished black at the tips and banded near the base with thin silver rings. Her long white-silver hair had partly come loose from whatever careful arrangement it had been in, and strands clung to her flushed cheeks. She moved fast, but not fast enough. Fear was written all through her, in the hard pull of her breath, in the way she kept glancing back, in the desperation in her bright green eyes. 3 men in dark tactical uniforms were after her. Not station security. Too coordinated. Too quiet. Hands near holsters, faces set in the professional blankness of men accustomed to killing in public. The woman slipped on crushed fruit from an overturned stand and went down hard on one knee. One of the pursuers lunged, caught her by the wrist, and yanked her up. "No," she cried. The sound cut cleanly through the noise. Richard stopped walking. He had spent years mastering that pause, that little space between instinct and action. Once, he had crossed it without thought. Once, there had been no hesitation at all. A cry for help, a drawn weapon, an impossible threat, he would move, and things would break. He had sworn that version of himself was dead. Then the man twisted the woman's arm behind her back and reached for restraints. Richard crossed the space in 2 strides. His fist hit the attacker's jaw with a sound like a hammer against a bulkhead. The man left the deck entirely and slammed into a support pillar hard enough to dent it before collapsing unconscious. The other 2 spun, weapons half-drawn. Richard was already inside the second man's reach. He caught him by the throat and lifted him effortlessly off the floor. The attacker clawed at Richard's wrist, boots kicking uselessly. Richard's expression didn't change. "I suggest," Richard said in a low, cold voice, "you reconsider your employment." Then he threw him sideways. The man crashed through a display rack in a shower of broken plastic and sparks. The third one actually fired. The blaster bolt split the air where Richard's head had been. Gasps rippled through the crowd. To ordinary eyes, Richard barely seemed to move. One instant he was in the line of fire, the next, he was somewhere else entirely, closing distance with impossible speed. He seized the gun, crushed the weapon casing in one hand until components fell hissing to the deck, then leaned close enough that the attacker could see something in his eyes that made men remember religion. "Last chance," Richard said. The man took one look at his unconscious partners and ran. The market had gone strangely still. Richard turned back to the woman. She was staring at him as if she had just watched a story become real. Her chest rose and fell sharply. One hand was pressed to her ribs. She was beautiful, yes, but that wasn't what held him. It was the pride in her posture despite the fear, the way she fought to stand straight even now, the way survival and dignity seemed locked in battle across her face. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Her throat worked. Then, to his deep discomfort, she dropped to her knees in front of him. "Please," she said, voice shaking. "Please don't let them take me. I'll serve you if I must. I'll be whatever you ask. Just don't hand me over." Several people nearby turned to stare harder. Richard frowned. "Get up." She flinched, as though expecting anger. "I said get up," he repeated, gentler this time. "I don't want a servant." Slowly, she rose. Tears shimmered in her eyes but did not fall. "Then why help me?" "Because I'm a fool," he thought. "Because I remember what it looks like when someone is cornered and nobody moves. Because if I walk away now, I'll hear that scream the rest of the year." Instead he said, "What's your name?" She hesitated, then answered, "Anna." He studied her for a long second. "All right, Anna. You can come with me. Temporarily." Relief flickered across her face so strongly it looked painful. "But," Richard added, "you tell me the truth. All of it." She nodded too quickly. "Yes. Anything." He gestured for her to follow. As they moved out of the market and into a dimmer transit corridor lined with freight conduits and flickering guide strips, Richard stayed alert. He could feel eyes on them. The station had a way of carrying rumors faster than comm signals, and public violence always bred interest. Twice he caught movement at the edge of his vision, twice it turned out to be nervous onlookers or scavenger kids pretending not to watch. Anna kept close without touching him, as if afraid he might vanish if she reached out. "Who were they?" Richard asked once they reached a quieter lift tunnel. She lowered her gaze. "I don't know all their names." That wasn't the question. Her hands tightened together. Blue fingers, slender but calloused at the tips. Not the hands of a sheltered aristocrat. That interested him. "They work for the regime," she said quietly. "Regime. Not government. Not security. Regime." Richard said nothing, and that silence pushed her onward. "My full name is Anna Navari," she said. "I am, or was, the crown princess of Neovia." The lift hummed around them. Richard turned his head, slowly. He knew the name. Not in detail, he avoided current politics on purpose, but even recluses heard the larger tremors. Neovia. Outer Rim Monarchy. Strategic Mineral World. Reports of unrest. A sudden change in leadership. Official statements about reform. Unofficial whispers about massacre. A princess, he said. Her jaw trembled once, then steadied. There was a coup. My family was murdered. I escaped with help from people who are dead now. Since then I've been moving from world to world under false identities. She swallowed. Someone sold my location. The lift doors opened. Richard led her through 2 more security doors and into a small apartment that looked almost aggressively functional. Bare walls. 1 worn couch. 1 metal table. Compact galley. No decorative items, no personal photographs, no signs that anyone lived there except necessity. The only thing truly expensive was the security system built invisibly into every seam. Anna stopped just inside and turned in a slow circle, taking it in. This is where you live. This is where I avoid being found. He locked the door. Sit. She sat. Richard remained standing. Tell me everything. Anna drew a long breath and began. She spoke of Neovia's jeweled oceans and cloud-ringed cities, of a palace built into cliffs above a silver sea, of her mother's diplomatic brilliance and her father's stubborn honor. She spoke of General Vex, once trusted, who had opened the gates to the usurper. Of Lord Zorak, a nobleman with industrial power. A private army, and ambitions too large to hide. Of the night the sky over the capital burned. Of servants screaming in the corridors. Of blood on marble steps. Of a hand dragging her through a hidden passage while the world she knew died behind her. She did not cry when she told it. That, more than anything, convinced Richard she was telling the truth. When she finished, the room seemed smaller. You want your throne back, Richard said. She looked up at him, horns framing her face like a dark crown. I want my people free. Those aren't always the same thing. No, she said. They aren't. Which is why I'm still alive. He almost smiled. You're not what I expected. Neither are you. Richard leaned against the wall, arms folded. That line usually comes later. A faint, startled laugh escaped her. It changed her whole face. For a heartbeat, he saw the woman she might have been without fear. Then the silence returned. Why me? He asked. Anna's expression became intent. Because in the market you moved like someone who has seen war and survived it. Because those men were armed, trained, and confident until they looked at you. Because you could have handed me over and walked away, but you didn't. She held his gaze. And because I think you are hiding something enormous, and men who hide power usually do it for a reason. Richard's jaw tightened. Perceptive. Dangerous. If I help you, he said, your life gets harder before it gets better. You train. You follow instructions. You stop making desperate bargains with strangers in markets. Color darkened slightly along her cheekbones. I was improvising. It was a terrible strategy. It worked. Barely. She lifted her chin. Will you help me or not? Richard looked at her a long time. He had meant to say no. What came out was, we start at dawn. The first lesson began before sunrise on the edge of the station's abandoned loading flats. The artificial sky was still dim, the overhead shield panels showing only a wash of indigo beyond them. Freight rails ran like scars across the ground. Old cargo towers loomed in silhouette. Wind pushed dust and metallic grit along the concrete. Anna stood in plain training clothes Richard had found in storage. Dark fitted pants. Light jacket. Hair tied back. Her horns caught the early light in muted arcs. She looked tired, stubborn, and ready to pretend she was not tired. Awareness, Richard said. She frowned. That's not a fighting style. It's the difference between living long enough to learn one and dying in the first 3 seconds. Without warning, he flicked a small bolt of scrap metal at her shoulder. It struck. Ow! She glared. Was that necessary? If that had been a bolt round, you'd be dead. He tossed another. This time she saw it too late and barely got an arm up. For the next hour, he said, you dodge. What if I want to throw things at you? You can when you stop getting hit. She did not stop getting hit for a while. But she adapted quickly. That was what impressed him. Not natural grace. She had some, but fear and fatigue ruined it. Not strength, she was fit, not formidable. It was her mind. She watched patterns. She learned the rhythm of his shoulders, the shift in his stance before he moved. When he changed rhythm to prevent anticipation, she noticed that too. By the end of the hour she was still bruised, still irritated, still breathing hard, but she was beginning to move with intention rather than panic. During a water break she dropped onto a low crate and flexed her aching fingers. How did you learn all this? Richard drank from a metal canteen. Bad places. That sounds deliberately mysterious. It saves time. She looked at him sidelong. Were you military? No. Mercenary? No. Assassin? He gave her a flat look. Fine, she said. That was unfair. It was inaccurate. She smiled despite herself. So there are answers you dislike because they're wrong, not just because they're personal. He almost laughed. Almost. Over the next days, the training deepened. Reflex drills became sparring. Sparring became tactical exercises. He taught her how to break an attacker's balance, how to read angles in a corridor, how to spot the false confidence of a man hiding backup. He put weapons in her hands. Not because he wanted her to become dependent on them, but because refusing tools on moral grounds was a luxury hunted people did not survive long enough to keep. She fought with knives better than she shot, and she shot better than she admitted. At night, over simple meals in the apartment or aboard a small hidden vessel in a secure hangar, they talked more. Not all at once. Not cleanly. The truth came in fragments between silence. He learned that Anna loved the sea and hated court dances. That she could navigate by stars taught to her as a child from palace observatories. That the silver rings around her horns had belonged to her mother. That she remembered every servant who died helping her escape. That she feared not death itself, but failing publicly, returning to Neovia only to inspire hope she could not protect. She learned that Richard never drank enough to dull himself. That he woke at the slightest sound. That every door he passed through was assessed, every window measured, every room mapped. That he could repair engines, cook adequately, and disappear emotionally with breathtaking speed whenever conversation drifted too close to his past. One night, while hyperspace trembled blue beyond the viewing strip of his ship, she found him alone in the cockpit. The vessel was unlike anything she had seen before, sleek, silver dark, custom-built, almost predatory in its lines. He called it the Shadow Blade. It responded to him like something alive. She leaned against the hatch. You built this, didn't you? Most of it. That isn't normal. Very little about me seems to meet your standards for normal. Anna smiled faintly, then grew serious. Richard, why were you really hiding? The starlight from the NAV displays painted his face in shifting blue. He could have refused. Instead he said, because sometimes the galaxy decides what you are before you do. Once people start attaching words like savior, monster, weapon, immortal, he stopped there. Anna stared. Immortal? I didn't say that. You absolutely did. He exhaled through his nose. I said people use dramatic words when they're frightened. She stepped closer. And are they wrong? His silence answered too much. Something softened in her expression then, not fear, but recognition. Not of what he was. Of what it cost. You don't have to tell me yet, she said quietly. Yet. It was a dangerous word. It implied a future. Before he could answer, alarms lit the cockpit red. Richard was in motion instantly, hands on controls, senses sharpening. Incoming. The tactical display flared with 4 fast-approaching signatures. Pirates. A comm channel hissed open, and a rough voice rolled through the cabin. Unidentified vessel, this is Captain Dax of the Blood Reavers. Power down and prepare to be boarded. Anna's hand went to the sidearm at her belt. Can they see us? They can see enough. Richard's fingers moved across the console. The shadow blade shivered once, then vanished from sensor-visible space. On screen, the pirate ships wheeled in confusion. Anna blinked. You cloaked us. Temporarily. Temporarily is concerning. Then the first barrage came anyway, spray fire into probable escape vectors. Richard threw the ship into a vertical spin, rolled beneath a mine cloud, skimmed so close past a drifting or fragment that Anna could see reflected laser bursts crawling over its surface. Her stomach dropped. Her pulse hammered. Somewhere in the middle of terror, she laughed. Richard glanced at her. You're enjoying this. I'm alive, she said breathlessly. It feels similar. They burst free of the ambush zone in a streak of bent light, leaving the pirates firing at ghosts. When quiet returned, it felt intimate. Anna turned to him, eyes shining with adrenaline. Who are you? He looked ahead at the stars. That question keeps finding me. And one day, he said, you may decide you preferred not knowing. She watched him in silence. But when they finally approached Neovia, it became clear that old secrets would not stay buried. The planet filled the view, vast, blue-green, wrapped in white storms and silver cloud bands. Anna's breath caught at the sight of home. Then her face drained of color. A blockade hung in orbit. One heavy warship. Multiple escorts. Neovian signatures, but altered, expanded, militarized. Vex, Anna whispered. He commands the fleet now. A channel opened almost at once. Unknown vessel, identify yourself and prepare for inspection by order of the Neovian Defense Authority. Richard's eyes narrowed. He was waiting. For me. For anyone daring enough to come back. He did not run. Instead, he changed the Shadow Blade's energy profile, spoofed its hull recognition, and became something smaller on their sensors, a routine patrol craft requesting emergency docking with critical intelligence. It was audacious. It was absurd. It worked. As the massive warship pulled them into its docking bay, Anna looked at him. Tell me the plan. Richard checked the charge on his sidearm, though they both knew he rarely needed it. We take the ship. Her mouth parted. Just the two of us. He looked up, and for the first time since she had met him, she saw the full shape of what lived behind his restraint. Not anger. Certainty. You still haven't seen what I can do, he said. The airlock opened. Armed guards waited in formation. Admiral Vex stood at their center, broad and weathered, silver insignia bright against black armor. Recognition hit his face first, then delight sharpened by cruelty. Well, he said. The lost princess returns. His gaze shifted to Richard. And who, Vex asked, is this? Richard stepped forward. Your mistake. Then everything broke. He moved faster than trained men could track. One guard's rifle twisted from his hands before he knew it was touched. Another folded over a strike that sounded like stone cracking. A stun baton snapped in half. A blast shot harmlessly into the ceiling where Richard had been a fraction of a second earlier. Anna ducked, drew, and fired with both hands steady, catching a soldier in the shoulder and another in the thigh. Vex shouted for reinforcements, but discipline collapsed against terror. There was no formation left to hold. Richard was not merely strong. He was impossible. He hit like a machine with judgment. He moved like gravity had negotiated separate terms with him. Within minutes the bay was down to groans, smoke, and the metallic scent of ruptured circuitry. Vex tried to flee. Richard caught him by the collar and slammed him against a bulkhead hard enough to buckle the metal. "You will order your crew to stand down," Richard said, voice like winter. "You will give us your bridge. And then you will tell us what Zorak has built on Neovia." For the first time, the admiral looked afraid. Hours later, with the warship under their control and key officers disarmed, the world below turned slowly beneath them. Anna stood at the bridge viewport, one hand against the glass. "I thought I'd never see it again," she murmured. Richard stood beside her, not touching, though the distance felt suddenly deliberate. "You're seeing it now?" "Yes." She turned toward him. "Because of you." He held her gaze for one dangerous second too long. Then planetary alarms erupted across the bridge. A beam of violent white energy speared up from the surface and nearly sheared through the warship's starboard shields. Crew members shouted. Consoles flashed. More beams rose, weaving a lethal net across the descent path. Vex, bloodied and restrained nearby, gave a grim smile. "He's upgraded the defense grid." Richard bared his teeth. "With off-world tech." "Black Star tech," Anna said, horrified. He nodded once. "That's why your regular loyalists can't break him." A second beam clipped the hull. The bridge lurched. "We can't land this ship under fire," a seized navigation officer shouted. Anna spun toward Richard. "The shadow blade." He understood instantly. The smaller ship, docked in the belly of the captured warship, was fast enough and stealth-capable enough to strike the surface cannons directly. "You stay here," he said. Her expression flashed with fury. "Absolutely not. I can do this faster alone." "And if you die alone, what then?" For a second their argument stood between them like drawn steel. Then another blast hit, and the warship screamed through its frame. Richard stepped close enough that only she could hear him. "Anna. If this fails, your people still need someone they can rally behind." "That cannot be me." Her eyes burned. "You don't know that." "I do." The way he said it ended the debate. She grabbed his wrist before he could turn away. "Come back." It was not a royal command. Not a strategic instruction. Just a plea. Something moved in his face. Something old and tired and unarmored. "I'll try," he said. Then he was gone. The shadow blade plunged through Neovia's atmosphere like a silver knife, cloaking in bursts between enemy targeting sweeps. Richard flew low over forests, mountain ridges, and coastlines lit by war. Surface emplacements tracked him with alien-assisted precision. He destroyed the first in a silent dive, the second by slingshotting behind its own shield arc, the third in a blaze that lit the clouds from within. The fourth got a shot through. Warning sirens screamed. The left stabilizer blew out. The ship spun. Richard wrestled the controls with both hands as the forest below surged upward. The crash tore a valley open. When he woke, smoke crawled through shattered trees and pain pulsed through every inch of him. The cockpit was twisted. Sparks dripped from dead conduits. His blood, dark and startlingly bright against the metal, ran from a cut at his brow. He forced the hatch and staggered out into burning undergrowth. Voices approached. "Search teams." He slipped into the shadows between trees just before armed troops arrived. Their armor was cleaner, more advanced than regular Neovian infantry. Black Star pattern enhancements. Zorak's elite. "Find the pilot," their commander ordered. Lord Zorak wants him alive. Richard's mouth curved without humor. Alive was optimistic. What followed was short and brutal. He came out of the dark like something the forest had decided to weaponize. A rifle turned on its owner. A knife hand broke at the wrist. A helmet shattered against a tree. The commander managed to keep his calm long enough to gasp, "He's not human." Richard put him down before the sentence ended. Then he turned toward the distant glow of the capital. Neovia was burning. And somewhere inside that fire, Anna was fighting. By the time Richard reached the outskirts of the city, dawn was bleeding pale gold into the smoke. Civilians fled through alleys. Resistance fighters exchanged fire from shattered arcades and broken transit lines. Above them, the stolen warship hovered over the eastern districts like a metal moon. He saved people as he moved because he could not help himself. A mother and child cornered by troops in an alley. A barricade about to be overrun. A squad of battle droids advancing on volunteers armed with stolen rifles. Each time he hit the line of conflict, it bent around him. Stories spread faster than strategy, a shadow moving through gunfire, a man tearing through Zorak's soldiers barehanded, a ghost in black who could not be stopped. By nightfall, hope had a face again. And in the eastern quarter, at a command post improvised from a ruined civic hall, Anna stood over tactical projections with blood on one sleeve and fire in her eyes. When she saw him, relief hit her so hard she forgot every watching officer in the room. She crossed the distance and stopped only because royalty did not throw itself into a man's arms in front of a war council. "Barely. You came back," she said. Richard looked at the maps instead of her. "I said I'd try. That isn't the same." "No," he admitted. "It isn't." Around them, commanders tactfully looked elsewhere. Anna straightened, queenly composure reassembling itself one piece at a time. "We know where Zorak is. Planetary Defense Center. He's coordinating from the Central Control Core." Richard's expression hardened. "Then that's where we end this." The assault began before sunrise. Resistance teams created diversions across 3 districts while Richard led the strike at the center. Anna should have stayed back to coordinate. She didn't. He argued with her once, briefly, then stopped when he saw there was no point. So they went together, through streets lined with wreckage, through breached security perimeters, through corridors choked with smoke and automated defenses. Inside the defense center, the final approach narrowed into armored halls under constant fire. Loyalists fell. Droids advanced. Richard tore open a sealed blast door with his bare hands while Anna covered him, her shots precise and ruthless. At the heart of the complex, they found Zorak. Tall. Broad. Part man, part machine now, cybernetics woven into his skull, one arm replaced with polished black alloy, his face sharpened by hunger and certainty. Behind him rose a device pulsing with alien geometry and impossible power. He smiled when he saw Anna. "My princess," he said. "You always were harder to kill than expected." Anna lifted her weapon. "Step away from the controls." Zorak's gaze slid to Richard. "And you must be the legend." "I'm the end of your reign," Richard said. Zorak laughed and triggered the device. The room shook. Power howled upward. Somewhere deep beneath them, systems woke that had never belonged on Neovia. "Black Star gifted me a future," Zorak said. "A weapon that can remake this world." Richard launched himself forward. The fight was catastrophic. Zorak was not his equal, but he was close enough to make the room pay for it. Their impacts cracked flooring, shattered consoles, and sent arcs of energy skipping wildly across the chamber. Anna fired when she could, cutting off drones and elite guards rushing in through side entries, but the center of the battle belonged to 2 forces colliding at too high a speed for ordinary men to survive near. Richard drove Zorak into the control bank. Alarms went feral. The machine's power spiked. Zorak, blood at his teeth, laughed again. Too late. If it overloads, the planet tears apart. Richard looked at the weapon. Then at Anna. In that instant, she understood. No, she said. He moved anyway. With a roar dragged from somewhere deeper than muscle, Richard seized the massive device, lifted it free of its locking frame, and drove upward. Metal ruptured. Concrete exploded. He punched through the ceiling into the open sky carrying the screaming core with him. The explosion lit the heavens. For one endless second, all of Neovia saw a second sun born above the capital. Then the light collapsed outward harmlessly into the upper atmosphere. The shockwave shattered windows across the city. When Richard fell back to Earth, he landed hard in the ruined chamber, one knee hitting cracked stone. But he was alive. Zorak stared at him in disbelief, terror finally stripping away all pretense. "What are you?" he whispered. Richard rose slowly, smoke lifting from his clothes. "I'm the man," he said, voice rough with power and age and fury, "you should never have forced out of hiding." Then he ended it. Rebuilding took longer than war. It always did. But Neovia endured. Anna was crowned in the Oceancliff capital beneath banners restored from hiding. The people filled the terraces, the sea wind carried the sound of bells, and the world that had nearly been broken looked, at least for a day, whole again. Richard stood apart from ceremony as long as he could. That did not last. When Anna spoke to her people, she called him forward. He disliked the attention instantly. The cheers that met him were too loud, too warm, too dangerous. This was how legends restarted, not with vanity, but gratitude. Anna took his hand anyway. "Neovia stands today," she said, her voice carrying across the cliffs, because courage returned when we had almost forgotten its shape. The crowd roared. Richard leaned closer to her and muttered, "You are making escape much more difficult." "Good," she murmured back. Later, when the ceremonies were done and sunset painted the sea in molten red, they stood alone on a high balcony overlooking the capital. For a while neither spoke. At last Anna said, "Stay." He closed his eyes briefly. "Anna." "Stay," she repeated, softer now. "Not because I owe you. Not because Neovia needs a weapon at its gates. Stay because this can be more than survival. For both of us." Richard looked at her then, at the ocean blue skin glowing warm in the setting light, at the black curved horns that made her look regal even in silence, at the strength that had survived exile without becoming cruelty. "I don't know how long I live," he said quietly. "I don't know what comes looking for me if I stop hiding. I don't know what being close to me costs." She stepped nearer until only breath separated them. "Then we learn," she said. "Together." He had faced fleets, tyrants, monsters, and centuries. None of them had terrified him quite like hope. But this time he did not run from it. When he kissed her, it felt less like surrender than like finally putting down a burden he had carried too long. Months later, Neovia flourished under new rule. Anna's wisdom steadied the crown. Richard became what the people needed without ever fully becoming theirs. Guardian. Advisor. Shadow at the edge of the throne. He trained new defenders, repaired orbital shields, and slowly, painfully, let himself belong somewhere. And for a brief, impossible season, peace held. Until far beyond Neovia, on a world wrapped in ancient dark, a figure stood before a wall of stars and watched the reports arrive. The being's face was hidden, but its eyes burned with old intelligence. "So," it murmured, "the lost sun steps into light again." A servant knelt. "What are your orders, Lord Erebus?" The figure smiled. "Nothing so crude as war," Erebus said. "Not yet." His gaze remained fixed on the image of Richard standing beside Neovia's queen. He has found something worth protecting. That makes him vulnerable. The servant bowed lower. Shall I assemble the Black Star envoys? Yes, Erebus said. And begin preparations. Back on Neovia, beneath twin moons and ocean winds, Anna stood beside Richard on the palace balcony and laced her fingers through his. What are you thinking? She asked. He looked out over the lights of the capital. The future, he said. She smiled faintly. That sounds ominous. With me, it usually is. She leaned into him. Then let it come. Richard wrapped an arm around her as the night deepened over the sea. For the first time in longer than he cared to measure, he allowed himself to believe that a man made of shadow might still deserve a home. Far above them, unseen in the dark between stars, something ancient began to move. And the galaxy, though it did not know it yet, was about to remember Richard's name.